That foster care system led to he needs to be secured, right? And they put me into residential treatment centers and group homes. My main focus at that point was to get out of them, right? And to get back home. Well, long story short, I ended up convicted of my first felony at 11 years old. But when I came home in 2010, I felt like an alien. I landed in a foreign world. It was completely different. My success was happening because I was home. Period. Whatever happened in business, whatever happened in money, did not matter. I was succeeding because I made it past the 15 years that I never imagined I would survive.
Hi there, my name is Teresa Hodge. I am the president and CEO of Mission Launch, and welcome to Come Home Ready. I'm so excited to have one of my good friends, Saad Solomon, here with me today.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
So we're going to get into some heavy stuff, but before we do that, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us what brings you to this work.
Certainly. So my name is Saad Solomon. I'm the CEO and founder of Solomon Consulting. It's a small consulting firm that provides high-level technical assistance to government, essentially looking at reentry ecosystems and making them friendly for people coming home. As you well know, it's a very local experience. Coming home in Maryland is different than coming home in Delaware, different than coming home in Arizona and California. And so I do that work specifically because I'm directly impacted by it. I had to experience and navigate that path myself. And so being able to provide some level of guidance, not only systemically, but to the individuals coming home, brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I probably have to stop and say Saad is one of my very smart friends. You know, you talked about ecosystems and all of that kind of stuff. So I just want to go just quickly in and out of that so that if someone's sitting in prison and they're trying to figure this out, you know, when you say ecosystems, what do you mean by that?
So when you think about it in terms of the world that we live in, we're all interdependent. You have economies, you have employers, you have consumers, you have families, you have school systems, education systems, you have systems of government, both local, both civil, both federal, both state. All of these are interplaying systems, and they essentially interface with each other and become interdependent on one function. So if school systems are functioning, the family suffers. If families are suffering, the local economy suffers. If jobs and economy aren't able to be continually producing, then the government suffers because the tax base is diminished. There are so many different ways that you consider this interplay. Not only are we more alike than different, but we're all more connected than we would ever admit.
Yeah. So before we get too far in the business side of this, because, you know, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what brings you to the work. Why do you know so much?
Why do I know so much? Because I wanted to find a way out. That was it. I had to figure out the anatomy of the entirety of the system. My entry into this system, long and arduous as it may be, was at 8 years old when I was pulled out unwillingly, you know, against my will, against my family's will, by Child Protective Services from my home into the foster care system. And that, as a young, angry child, homeless at 8 years old, found myself in a situation where I was rebelling. And rebelling as an 8-year-old youth in 1984 was violent, was fighting, was punching, was kicking, and was running away, if you think of that, right? So that foster care system led to he needs to be secured, right? And they put me into residential treatment centers and group homes. My main focus at that point was to get out of them, right? And to get back home. Well, long story short, I ended up convicted of my first felony at 11 years old. And from then on, I would not spend another 7-month period consecutively free from the ages of 11 to 17 years old.
So I want to stop you for just a second because I've heard your story so many times, but and I know you see this when you talk to me sometimes, like my mother's heart break for you.
Yeah.
You know, the thought of an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old being in and out of foster care and, not having the safety net
Yeah.
of family.
Indeed.
Like this country is built off of, and one of our institutions that protect us are families.
Indeed.
Or they're supposed to. And in your case, what you're saying is the institution of family wasn't there, and not your parents' fault. Let's not make anything good or bad.
Certainly.
Or, any of
Certainly,
those. But just, for just a second, I just wanted to pause because you were 8, you were 11.
Yeah.
In and out of the system.
You're right. To your point, I have an 11-year-old daughter right now, and at 8 years old, I couldn't imagine, right? Mm-hmm. So I do consider that all of our parents, all of our predecessors essentially have all done the very best that they could, whatever that looks like. And that's a much more reassuring feeling to move forward with and to strive to do better. But institutions such as families do fail, mm-hmm. and they fail frequently mm-hmm. for many of us in many different ways. Mm-hmm. And my experience has been that, we play the hand that we're dealt. Mm-hmm. As often as we can play any other hand or wish we could play another hand, we play the hand that we're dealt.
Mm-hmm. So take me to, I know your story starts at around 17-ish, mm-hmm. where the journey inside of prison began. You don't have to unpack all of the details that got you there. It's your choice. It's your story. I always tell people, your story is your story. You get to share it freely or not.
Indeed.
And whatever part of it that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable sharing all of it. It's been very much a very freeing experience for me to be able to share because I focus on my story to allow people to imagine what the possible is as opposed to the probable. Mm-hmm. Because I was probable to be a life prisoner. I was probable to be dead. I was probable to be so many different endings than what you see here today. So at 17 years old, I accidentally killed my best friend in a home invasion robbery of other drug dealers, and I was sentenced to do 15 years in prison. And I served 15 years in prison, day for day. And essentially from 17 to 32, I grew up in prison. And I was a very angry young man. I wasn't a model inmate. I wasn't involved in programming and activities and wanting to be all of those things, which I now am wishing that I would have had that step up, right? Because come home ready is exactly what we want for all of our brothers and sisters that are inside. Come home ready is such an important concept because it really truly says that I'm going to empower you to be ready. But when I came home in 2010, I felt like an alien. I landed in a foreign world. It was completely different.
So wait a minute. What year did you go to prison?
1995.
Okay, and you came home?
In 2010.
Okay. So in 1995, what was happening? Just to anchor folks into 1995. From maybe a technology perspective, do you remember?
So I would later hear about, I knew nothing about technology. The only things that I saw in 1995 from a technology standpoint, mm-hmm. of course, we had pagers, beepers, and there were these big Motorola cell phones that were about the size of my hand, and I have a pretty big hand. Mm-hmm. So that size with a flip out, and then the little antenna that you pull up. Of course, there was the book bag cell phone that we all knew about, the big white clunky thing. At that point in my life, my most technologically advanced friend had a cordless phone. So let's not talk cell phones. That was it. Like they had cordless phones. That was the tech. I would later come to find out that at that point, there was such thing as called dial-up internet, that America Online was beginning, that there was a bunch of World Wide Web concepts beginning and starting, which would lead to a tech boom from the late 90s, 97, 98, 99 to the bubble bursting right around 2000, 2001, right? So I would read all of that, but I didn't experience any of it. Mm-hmm.
So then it's safe to say that while you were in prison, there weren't iPads.
No. There wasn't anything, but I need a job.
So tell me, how did you spend your time?
Reading, studying, working out. Mm-hmm. Following sports, because the thing about following sports was that I began to understand data.
Mhm.
I began to understand statistics because I was following players and following their stats. And that gave me some idea of predictive modeling,
Mhm.
essentially. Sports betting, all of those things that I was involved in back then. I didn't know then that they were refining my faculties of understanding, but they truly did allow me to read numbers and understand what the story that the numbers told.
Yeah.
So that was just one thing. Another was interpersonal communication. Really, truly, I went in. I was 17 and really angry. And at 17 years old, you either know everything, right? I mean,
Or you think you do.
or you think you do.
Right.
So I went in and I just began listening to stories of people that I had thought to be lesser than me.
Mm.
Right? Like, you see an old man or you see an old woman, and they're addicted and they're involved in the streets and they're panhandling. As a 17-year-old drug dealer that was a street goon, I looked at them in a very abstract way. But then when these were the men and women that I was with serving my time and I got a chance to listen to, I found out that everyone has a story and that everyone can fall and that everyone has triumphs and everyone has tribulations. And so it was very, very opening, and it humanized for me the ease in which our world flips from fantastic to not so.
Mhm. I know. One, we're going to have many conversations
Yeah.
so that we can go deeper, because you already said you weren't a model prisoner.
Yeah. Wasn't a model inmate.
And just for context, did you ever do any time in the shoe, in the hole?
Yeah. No, I did a significant amount of time in solitary confinement. In the shoe, I served about 3.5 years in solitary confinement in varying stints. I did about 20 whole stints. I was involved in a lot of stints.
What does that mean?
In Delaware.
That's prison jargon for the record.
Yeah,
there are a lot of people
prison
like, I don't know what
jargon.
a stint is.
In Delaware, if you get into a fight or if you have a major write-up, you go to the hole for anywhere from 0 to 14 days.
So the 0 to 14 is a stint?
That's the stint.
A period of time.
A period of time.
Okay, got it.
Indeed.
So, we got to humanize some of the language here for other folks.
That, was in the shoe, was in varying security levels, had a bunch of interfaces with the establishment, right? So what is the whole? It's jail within a jail within a jail. And those levels of behavioral units were specific to someone, and I can look back now and see why I was there. I was really angry. I was really hurt. I was really desperate. I was in need of solace. I was in need of an escape, essentially, right? And couldn't have it any other way because I was living prison every day, all day. And so it was one of those things where, that formed me. And I often tell everyone that I speak to today is that I was not just raised within the system, but I was more importantly raised by lifers.
Wow. That's, even as a person who's gone to prison, so much of your story I can't relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, what I can relate to is being separated from family, community, and in community still.
Sure.
And you've got to figure out how to exist or coexist
Absolutely.
in that world.
Absolutely.
But I want to walk us a little bit out of prison.
Okay.
So 2010, what was the first thing you did when you came home?
Ate. I ate.
So there's a theme brewing here.
There's a theme.
Did you have a good meal ever in prison where you were like, this was the best meal ever?
It's difficult to understand, right? Because while I was in, I lived being in. I wasn't one of those guys that yearned about the streets or dreamt about the streets. Because I went in at 17. I had no idea that I was going to survive being incarcerated. So that was my life. And I enjoyed every relative moment that I was given, right? So I would laugh when I was inside. I'd have hearty laughs with my friends, my circle, my guys that I would work with and hang out with and do push-ups with. And we'd lap the yard together and all those things. We had great times. We'd share in triumphs and tribulations. Of course, I also didn't want visits. I didn't want letters from home. I didn't want to make phone calls for a very, very long time because I wanted to just forget the streets. I wanted to forget that there was a world outside of the world that I was existing in. So did I ever eat good in there? Sure. I tried to replicate the same meals that I used to use from the commissary stuff. I tried to replicate that when I came home, and it was disgusting.
One day we'll have to have probably 5-10 people, and we'll sit around and talk about prison cooking.
Oh my gosh,
what we thought
that's
was
a whole
good.
episode.
Exactly. What we thought was good then, and then when we come home, we're like, what were we thinking?
Yeah, cooking.
Yeah.
Prison cooking.
So if I did not know that you had ever been to prison, I wouldn't know.
It's true.
Because of how you show up today.
Yeah.
The jobs that you've had.
Yeah.
The people you know.
Indeed.
Yeah. And so, what's funny is folks, we met at a training for directly impacted people.
Yep. Leadership training.
It was at Just Leadership USA. We're there, and I had already gone through the program. You went through the program. Lauren went through the program as well. And
how did I get there?
Yeah.
What happened?
Because you had a name before it was over.
Yeah.
Like they named you 84th floor.
Yeah.
Because they were like, oh my God.
Straight from the bottom
to the top. They were like, you can't have a conversation with Saad and he not talk about business and take you straight to the top. Yeah. So how did this 17-year-old, very angry person who went to prison, how did you end up being where you are? So like, talk to me about your first job. And then from there, let's, get into kind of your career trajectory.
Certainly. And this story gets really rapid really quickly, right? It starts off really slow. So
slow and dark.
Slow and dark. I had a really difficult first half to that story, but then things get a little exciting. So I came home, I got a job working at a pizza shop, which again, when you come home, reentry is very much a process of I'll take what I can get.
Absolutely.
You're in the scraps of life. You're in the out of bounds. So whatever anyone else does not want, you will gladly take because you literally live one man's trash is another man's treasure. That is reentry, right? You live that, at least in the beginning. So I got a job at a pizza shop. My manager was a 16-year-old girl whose most significant adversity that she'd ever overcome was acne. And so she didn't understand.
Acne is important.
Acne is important. Let's not minimize.
That's right.
what it is. But yeah, she was my manager and it was humiliating. And what I learned at the pizza shop was how to communicate with people that didn't respect me, which I had not done. I had never done that. Because in prison, you were going to respect me. You had no choice. That was it. That was the entirety of the program. You're going to respect me, period. Out here, that was a very real experience that I think I benefited the most from because it level set me. And it gave me an opportunity to really think back like, wow, everything's different. I don't have the same access to tools as I had in there. My tools are different. So that was just a remarkable experience. Maybe not the most pleasant, but certainly remarkable. Second job, which I had a second full-time job. I worked at a payday loan company answering phones because again, I can speak, I can answer a phone, I can, project my voice telephonically. And that was the opportunity. And finally, I had a part-time job cleaning up at a church, right?
So you had all three of these jobs at the same time?
Yep, all at the same exact time. I would go from the pizza shop 40 hours a week to the payday loan company 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week if overtime was allowed. And then to the church where I had limited time because it was only on Sundays that I would go in and clean or Mondays afterwards. So, and I did that for a year and it was 100, maybe 130 hours a week work every week. And my tax return came back and said that I'd earned $24,600 and some dollars.
With all three of those jobs?
All three of those jobs, yeah. Which at that point would have had me at about 103% under the poverty level. So it's like, how do you get?
You did the math.
I did the math. I did. No, it was very unique, right? So it was like, wow, 2 full-time jobs, 1 part-time jobs, and you're still 100+% under the poverty level. So,
and then what changed?
Yeah. So what I haven't told you,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the absolute truth here,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the first time you're going to hear this truth on camera. Before I started what I did, I applied to 5,000 jobs. I applied to 1 million positions and was never heard anything back. Application after application after application after application, online. And it was through the months of November, December, January, February, March of 2010 through early spring of 2011, I'd applied to every position that I thought that I was, had an opportunity for. But anyway, it didn't happen. And so I started my own landscaping company, which for all intents and purposes morphed to a commercial irrigation installation firm. Mm-hmm. And that went and hit like a lightning bolt.
Yeah. So you said that you applied to 500, then you said 1 million jobs, but you applied to so many jobs that you lost count.
Yeah.
Is what you're basically saying.
Yeah.
But for just a second, did you apply for those jobs first and then you got these 3 jobs, or you applied for all of those jobs while you had those 3?
Very interesting. So no, the answer is no. The 3 jobs that I received, mm-hmm. I got through network.
Got it.
My sister
mm-hmm.
knew the pizza shop owner. That's how I got in at the pizza shop. My sister also knew the owner of the payday loan company, and the payday loan company owner interviewed me knowing that my sister had referred me to the job. I got both of those jobs without ever applying. Mm-hmm. The 3rd job was my mother-in-law and father-in-law, mm-hmm. their church.
Got it.
I was cleaning up, right? So I didn't have to ever.
So no one hired you.
No one would have hired me except for my network.
Right.
Now, while I was working these jobs and as exhausted as I wanted better than this. No, I didn't feel comfortable working at a pizza shop, working at a payday loan company, even though they were good jobs. I'm not saying that they're not. They weren't what I wanted. It wasn't who I saw myself as. Mm-hmm. And so I kept applying to jobs every day. I'd come home from work, whatever time it was, and I would apply for jobs. I would go to Career Builder. I would go to Monster.com. I would go to Indeed. This is before Indeed was even there. And I was just looking for jobs. And I'd apply and I'd apply and I'd apply. And I was scouring Craigslist and all these different, everything I did was to find a better job.
And so what kept you from giving up in that moment? Because for so many people, I've heard stories of folks who really kept track. Yeah. They were like, I applied for 142 jobs. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine 142 no's around employment.
So there's a couple of things. One, I'll never give up.
So period. You just had I
had a spirit that I was never going to give up this fight. Mm-hmm. Period. Ever. From the moment that I went to prison till this very moment, I'm a fighter and I'm never going to tap out.
So you stopped fist fighting physically.
And now started brain fighting the world.
Yeah.
And you realize
but it's resilience, right?
Yeah, you realize you don't even, the moment you think of this approach as a fight is the moment you lose. Mm-hmm. Because fight means, it speaks to resistance, right? Mm-hmm. You want to go with the flow. You want to prepare yourself. And I'm going to tell you, it's not that I ever knew what I was going to do when I came home. Mm-hmm. I didn't know.
So you didn't have a vision. And I talk about me sitting on my bunk and people are on their bunk dreaming a dream. You didn't have a vision, or did you?
I did. I have to describe it, right? So I had a vision, mm-hmm. but I did not add any specifics to it.
Mm.
So I didn't know what I was gonna do,
Mm-hmm.
but I very clearly knew what I was not gonna do.
Okay. Which was?
Crime, robbery, streets, illicit, break any rule. I wasn't gonna break any rule.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was going to remain open to what the universe opened for me.
Got it.
Right? So like that was it. What I'm not gonna do is this. Everything else is game on.
So for just a second,
Yeah.
you had no plan, but a plan.
I had a plan. I had a very specific plan.
Yeah,
And
which is fine. You were 17.
yeah.
So it's not like you had a career and you know, oh, I'm going to go down this track.
Yeah.
So you weren't sure, but you were sure.
I was absolutely
Not
sure.
sure what it's going to be.
But
I know what it's
sure
not
how
going
it
to
was
be.
going to look. Exactly. You're 100% right there.
Okay.
And what I think that benefited me in that preparation is that it allowed me to look at every opportunity with specific analytical discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me to look and see what was beneficial, what was not so much, and how to take advantage and avail myself of what opportunities presented themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I started my own landscaping company.
Mm-hmm. And when you say started a landscaping company,
Mm-hmm.
can you break that down? Was it a real company or was it like a lawnmower? Because for some people I know, it's like, hey, I'm going to cut enough grass,
Yep.
lawns,
yeah.
in order to pay my bills.
Yeah.
Not quite yet a company. And then there's folks who actually start a company. So what did you do?
It's a micro enterprise according to the Small Business Administration.
I love it. I love your technical answer for the
It
record.
was a truck, a used truck, a good utility trailer, a fantastic zero-turn lawnmower, all used,
Mhm.
all off of Craigslist. Went to the farmer's market, bought all kinds of hand tools, and literally there was a website called Vistaprint. And I had just discovered it. I'd never been to Vistaprint, but I wanted to build a business card. And so I went on there and they gave me a template and I helped, plug in my information. And as I went to check out, the good people at Vistaprint just knew that I also needed a coffee mug. And so they offered this coffee mug. And I was like, wow, whoever is designing this mug is on point. So I clicked it. Next thing you know, some other fantastic person at Vistaprint designed a pen for me. And then they offered that as I was about to check out. Long story short, I ended up with thousands of items that day. Truck magnet, pens, papers, forms, mugs, hats, polos, all with my
So you
logo
really
and
started a
emblem.
business,
So I literally started a business, and I tell you, there was no
at least from a branding perspective.
from a branding standpoint and walking around looking the part. I was, for all intents and purposes, a business
Okay.
quickly with this company, right? So then next thing you know, I hosted a website through them and one of their marketing people. Mind you, I had no familiarity with the world.
Mm-hmm.
One of the marketing people calls me and they're like, hey, how you doing, Mr. Solomon? And I'm like, fantastic. How are you? And he's like, so it looks like you just started Solomon Landscapes and Designs with us. And I'm like, yeah, it's a brand new company. I just came home after doing 15 years in prison.
You said that to the
I
person
said
on the
to
phone?
him- to them, I didn't know he was marketing. I thought he was calling to help me, which for all intents and purposes, I think he did. And yeah, so we have this long conversation and he tells me about this galactic inner space term called search engine optimization.
SEO.
SEO.
Got it.
Today, I can tell you, today I know I can optimize all of my net presence, my websites for 15, 20 minutes and $0, if maybe $7 a month hosting, right? It's like nothing. But I dedicated a monthly recurring charge of $2,800.
Okay, wait a minute. So,
Yeah.
wait a minute. $2,800 a month.
A month.
And how long have you been home from prison?
At this point,
Mhm.
9 months.
Okay. So here's one thing I know about a lot of people who've been to prison. We're really pretty risky.
We're risky.
There's a part of us where we still have a little risk. I mean, $2,800 a month, monthly recurring, month after month, for a startup business is what you were paying for.
Yep.
Okay.
To optimize my website, because the marketer was telling me that he would have Solomon Consulting as a top 10 company on 100 different search engines.
In the state of Delaware?
I imagined it to be the
In
state
the
of
world.
Delaware, but it could have been the world. It could have been like one such search engine in Thailand. Who knows? But it worked, right? So then at that moment, I received my largest contract, which was the very first contract that I received, and ended up clearing $60,000 on a job, which
Wow.
took my company to cash flow that I had never seen. I immediately, instead of, going and spending, I tripled my capacity. I bought 3 more trucks. I bought 3 more trailers. I hired 8 guys. I created a plethora of subcontractors around it. And we ended up grossing $2.7 million in 14 months.
Say that again.
Yeah.
In 14 months.
Yeah.
Okay. But now let's walk back a little bit.
Yeah.
What month, from the time you came home, this was like month what?
This was month 9 when I started the company. It was in December of 2010 when I started the company.
Okay.
Started working on building the marketing, the SEO, the website, and all that between December of 2010 through spring of 2011.
Wow.
And
then you did $2.7 million.
Yes.
This was
2011 to 2012.
And this was after a bunch of no's.
After all of the no's, yeah.
For a job.
I am so grateful for every company that told me no. I would not have had the same path.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was very, very, very afraid to fail. And it wasn't afraid to fail from a business standpoint. It was afraid to fail on probation, on parole. I didn't want my probation officer to violate me and send me back, right? So
what does that mean? So you're home, you're on probation and parole. How long was your probation and parole?
So it ended up not being long. I had 5 years of probation and parole to do, and it ended up being discontinued in 27 months.
And that is because probation and parole has the ability, their prerogative, to say, we'll end probation and parole. Or they also have the ability to say, if you don't follow certain rules, then you go back.
It's so back to jail, or we make a recommendation that your probation is terminated, right?
Yeah,
so they have that authority with the courts.
Okay.
So my goal was to stay out of jail, stay out of prison, never go back. So starting my own company, my probation officer had said, this is a risky move. You're starting your own company. And I was like, I know. And he was like, well, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, look at how much I earned. And I had all of my tax documents because I was that guy that, when I was coming home, there was a counselor that I knew. Her name was Miss Williams. And I spoke to her and I said, Miss Williams, I'm about to go home. And I know I've been a problem in here. And I know I've gotten in a bunch of stuff here. Tell me something.
But I'm really going to be better out there.
Tell me something that'll keep me free. She said, Saad, I'm going to tell you, don't let your probation officer, this is exact words, do not let your probation officer find out anything. And I'm like, this has to be the dumbest advice a counselor could give me to stay free. So I'm like, can you explain to me what you mean? Don't let your probation officer find out anything. And she said, tell them everything. She said, because if a probation officer finds out from a court or a police station or somebody else that you're doing something wrong and you didn't tell them, they're going to feel like you're being deceptive. But if you tell them straight up what's going on, you're much more likely to have an honest response and support. And so I was like, okay, well, I used that. And I went home because I wasn't doing anything wrong. Righteous conduct fears no exposure. It's the misconduct that fears to be exposed. So for me, it was like, I'm bringing everything. Here's my pay stubs. I'm not making money. Here's my here's my bills. I'm paying more than I'm earning, right? Here's what I'm looking at. I'm making a whole lot of little go a long way. And my probation officer was like, man, you're doing all the right things. And I had credit cards at that point because Kelly had put me on as an authorized user on over $65,000 worth of credit lines. And I had no bills because I was managing my credit well, right? These are all things I was taught myself, all these things while I was inside reading, studying. Well, by the time I started my landscaping company, my probation and parole officer, his name was Tom Barry, he's like, this is risky. You could fail. And I was like, Tom, I'm never going to fail. I'm already winning. I've already succeeded. So that is the goal. That is the key. That's what made me successful. I did not think about failure because I had already succeeded. My success was happening because I was home. Period. Whatever happened in business, whatever happened in money, did not matter. I was succeeding because I made it past the 15 years that I never imagined I would survive. I had already succeeded.
I like the fact that you said you were already winning because you were home, you had survived the 15 years in prison, and you were committed to not going back.
That's right.
So come home ready. Tell me first, what does that mean to you?
Coming home ready means the ability to navigate the waters ahead. Smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. But a sailor that survives rough seas is one who's ready, one who's prepared, one who knows what to do when things go wrong, one who knows how to respond when adversity hits. And the thing about it is this: when I first came home, I had the very foolish idea that my greatest challenges were behind me. And I didn't realize that, sure, I had overcome one of the most challenging circumstances I would ever face in my life, but I would be encountered with a brand new set of challenges. And coming home ready, for me, was reading about everything, learning about everything, but never understanding it. So Come Home Ready as an initiative is something that I feel very powerfully about and very strongly about, because it allows me to impart the wisdom, the translated wisdom of what practical application of readiness is. So let me explain that further, because I want to kind of double click on that. Being smart is to know that a tomato is a fruit. Being wise is to know not to put it in fruit salad.
Agree.
Coming home ready, you can be given all of the information, but not know how to use it. You can be given tools and told what to do, but not know how to benefit from it. Opportunities will be presented, and if you're not able to identify it as an opportunity, it'll pass you by. And so in the reentry period in which I came home, the resources weren't there. Quite frankly, I came home in 2010, and reentry in Delaware was a non-existent field. It was a concept. It wasn't yet in practice. And so there weren't any resources. I had to build community around a new network. I had to identify resources my own, and I bootstrapped everything. And bootstrapping is literally pulling out of your own pocket to make your own way. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, as people say. So yeah, Come Home Ready to me is an initiative that is absolutely critical, because it gives me the opportunity, you, everyone on this podcast, and everyone that's involved in this initiative, including Aventive and Securus, to really go back and do in-reach and be credible messengers that have lived this, experienced this, done this, and have succeeded at it, and say, look, this is what you need to do to succeed. Because here's the one thing that I have to be honest with you. When I was incarcerated, it was my first time in prison. I was 17 years old, and I was there for 15 whole years. And the one thing about it, I never met anyone inside that had succeeded on probation. Everybody inside had been violated, or everybody inside had committed a new offense and came back to a new sentence. So everybody told me false information about what it was like to succeed out here. So I want to go back and provide information to the men and women that are coming home that need real, valid information from a different source, that says, listen, not only did I make it when I came home, I'm going to make it and I'm going to be there when you come home.
I love that. I love that. I always say that we have a national problem called mass incarceration,
Mm-hmm.
and reentry is hyperlocal.
Indeed.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that entirely. As simple as hyperlocal, it's hyperlocal and hyper moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because a nonprofit that existed that provided incredibly valuable services may not exist 6 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see that post-COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our agencies that were once thriving are no longer even operational. Doors are barred up. Windows are barred up and shut, and it's over. So very much hyper-local. You can't apply a national strategy to a very local person.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking an individual that's coming home to live on the west side of whatever town, and whatever access is within 9 to 12 miles, that 9 to 12 miles is their world.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give for someone who is returning home to community,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to start over? It's, in one sense, they can't reimagine because they never had the first imagination about their future.
Certainly.
So what advice would you give someone about coming home and starting over?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, you're enamored with freedom. You're enamored with it, right? The very first week, everything is fantastic. You smile at everything. The second week, you smile less.
Mm-hmm.
And the third week, you start to be afraid.
Mm.
And so once you get through that emotional, very rapidly moving set of experiences, you begin to feel the pressure. Your first, second, third appointment with your probation officer, your parole officer really indicate to you how intense this process is. You're going to be given directives again, and those directives are going to be given with very specific follow-up of all the consequences. So I'm going to tell you, Saad, that if you have a job, you'll have access to 2 hours free time on Saturday and Sunday. If you don't have a job, you're going to be taken into work release centers, and your status will be upgraded from probation back to work release. And if you violate, you're going back to jail. And these are all things, like, everything was given with a consequence. Nothing was given freely, and with support, right? And humanizing language. It's not the system. The system doesn't give us that. So we have to give ourselves that. So what advice would I give people specifically is immediately begin putting yourself in positions where you're providing a healthy curiosity into every opportunity. Do not look down upon anything that's presented to you and say, that's not something that I want to do.
Be willing to take a job at a pizza shop with a 16-year-old being your boss.
Absolutely, because at that pizza shop, I ended up meeting two of my very best customers that I ended up monetizing over $150,000 worth of work, including an in-ground pool at the pizza shop. And you just never know,
right? Because
you're building relationships with people. The most valuable aspect of our world out here is our ability to connect to our community and build relationships.
Yeah. Well, one thing I can say is you are one of the best networkers.
Yes.
That I know.
Yeah.
People like you like people.
Yes. And your network determines your net worth. I'm telling you, I swear to you, I swear by it. It's the people
That's why they call you 84th floor.
84th floor. And I'm going to tell you, it's funny because when I first came home, and I'd hear this all throughout prisons, it's not who you know, it's what you know, or it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I venture to say that it's neither. Not who you know, and it's not what you know, it's who knows you. And that who knows you is
maybe what they think about you.
Which you get the call, right? Exactly. I need X, Y, and Z, I'll call Saad. If I can be I'm going to call that person the first 10 people of 100 important people, then that's a win. The idea is build relationships that are lasting, that are meaningful. People want to help you. No one in this world that I've encountered is going to dismiss your challenges, dismiss your adversities, unless you present them in a way that makes you deserving of their kindness. If you come to them and say, I'm just looking for an opportunity and I'm here to bring my work, my mettle, my dedication, my commitment to this table, people will give you an opportunity all day, every day. I've not seen one person turn that down.
So when you had those rejections of jobs, what's important for people to know is today, technology rejects you.
Certainly. Kicked out before you even...
Yeah, so it wasn't...
Algorithms.
Yeah, because what you're saying to me is people were willing to give you the opportunity.
Yeah.
But when you were applying online, the technology...
bumped you right out. And that's it. Like we have to humanize this digitization that's taking place in our world, especially for people that are coming with strikes, right? Which is why I'm a board member of R3 Score, because quite literally a new methodology of how to interpret background information and life events is necessary in our world and in our day and age. And further, having access to opportunity is the only way that us as humans and as Americans and in our society are able to move forward and make a better place for ourselves. So that's it.
Yeah. So take 15 seconds and I want you to look into the camera and just talk to a man who might have gone to prison early on in his life and is going to come home. He may or may not have the opportunities that you had. He may or may not have the $2.7 million level of success because you're a unicorn. Let me be very clear. There are a lot of people who have had lots of success, but success looks different for each person.
Yeah.
But what we want is for people not to give up in this moment and to maybe, have this tablet and dream a dream that only the tablet can hold space for.
Absolutely.
While they're there.
Absolutely. So I would say to him that you yourself have to be willing to fight past all of the barriers that you hold in your own mind before you ever encounter the barriers of this world. And the barriers of your mind are the ones that tell you that you can't, that you won't, that you shouldn't, and that you might not. And that your inability to make it will hold you back. If I could tell you, just dream the impossible, because the impossible is where you will succeed. That's where you're going to find your win. Push past all of the no's, push past all the obstacles, and lean on the community that you know you can trust. And that might be your family. That might be the brothers, the sisters that you did your time with. It might be the church. It might be the faith-based organization. It might be that your best friend is your probation officer. Who knows? But find that medal and push past your barriers.
I love you.
I love you.
Well, I'm so excited to be able to do this work with you.
Yeah.
You were one of the first people who I called and said,
we're doing this.
We're doing this.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that you know me and I know you.
Yeah.
And we're going to help folks come home ready.
We're going to help folks come home
ready.
Let's do it. Let's do this.